deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living the lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present, along with our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, Pay Attention or Pay the Piper. But before we begin, make sure that you like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Greetings, one and all.
Greetings, Dr. G. Glad to be here with you again. I've been busy, you've been busy, and we're continuing to try to get some work done. Now, due to the political atmosphere, not just here in North America, but actually around the world, whether we pay attention to it or not, the reality is ongoing. As we talked for years at the House of Reawakening Minds, that we would have a feedback loop, and you recognize that nation states, including people or nation states and political state jurisdictions that were in alliance with the United States, are operating or executing what they refer to on surface narrative de-dollarization. And of course that affects everyone, but a lot of people, and particularly a lot of our people who have been subjected to de facto government, may not know the effect that it's having on them, that it's had on them, and that it will have on them. So in general, our conversations, not unlike conversations we usually have, are intended to actually try to give or assist in giving our people a heads up so they can start taking control of their lives relative to whatever limit they're capable of or willing to. However, a lot of, just as we talk today, pay attention or pay the piper. Many of us are paying the price for not paying attention to a lot of things or signals that was presented to us years ago. Not unlike 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I talked from the House of Reawakening Minds, and I said, pay attention to Deutsche Bank.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, even though they're not necessarily talking about it right now, a lot of the corrupt politicians who have their investments in the mortgage system that's controlled by the General Education Board, because as you already know, and most of those of you who've been listening to us here at the House of Reawakening Minds know that we've informed you all for years that they converted Aboriginal and allodial titles into mortgages and deeds 1913 on Jekyll Island. That was one of their major parts of their meetings. And so a lot of the economic problems that people are running into right now, many people are not aware that it's actually tied to that, not just the fiat operations, if you get the whole point. And that has much to do with people who are currently and will be shortly paying the piper for not paying attention to what we've been telling them. Not unlike, like over the years, when we talked about that people should set up a trust.
Mm-hmm.
And this is only one of other things that they should be doing and should have paid attention to, because the operatives, the de facto operatives, unbeknownst to the people, have been liquidating these people's own estates without their knowledge to cover their private debts. And a lot of those mortgages have been held in Jusha Bank. And while it's not mainstream news, we're talking to people now because, we've usually done research and tried to help the people, knowing that they would not get this information on mainstream news. And unfortunately, in some cases, over the years, we've had more people trolling the information than actually listening and really trying to help their own families. So as you see, and as you will be seeing, in coming weeks, not next year, in coming weeks, a lot more economic problems that will be on the people's back. In order to give them kind of a heads up, when we told them pay attention to Jusha Bank, so they can do their own research and try to preserve some of their own estates that will be dwindled, if not lost to them. I just want to throw that out for a point of reference, etc. That we all, and it's just not people we're talking to, that includes all of us, are paying the piper for our passivity that we've exercised for many generations past. Not unlike the price that our people have been paying for believing in the manumission issue that we talked about, that you brought up many times, Dr. G. The illusion that we were liberated did not equate to the reality. And many of the economic and social problems that we're suffering today is because we accepted that army, that false foundation, as a reality and became complacent. And because many things that could have been done and should have been done were not done, many people who are suffering today don't know that we're suffering from those things, because they think because those things took place, over 100 years ago, that it had no current effect, and it absolutely does. And of course, again, I was listening to your show that you had the other night, right? Yeah, and I'm just letting you all know. Go back and check it out. And of course, when I finish, I'm going to go listen to the rest of it because I was working, as you already know, and that was very insightful. And even that, is an indication of us not even paying attention to our intuitive mind, because many of those things which were natural to us were knowable, but because we exercise concepts that was presented to us by people who were actually promoting passism and promoting the idea that we don't think for ourselves, is why a lot of the ignorance, whether you're dealing with politics, whether you're dealing with monetary issues, whether you're dealing with religion, etc. The many of the areas where humanity is suffering today is because we didn't pay attention to details. And I noticed that when you were talking, you were starting to get into some details about the Septuaginta and the Bible, and going, and also by virtue of you having done some more research on your own, and also your experience as a pastor, you start looking at things more realistically and less emotionally, and start recognizing there's areas that's even in the books that are there for us to see that we didn't really pay attention to, that would really show you a lot of things and support the conclusions that you come to when you do start getting realistic. And it's really interesting because it really boils down to state of mind in many areas.
Yeah. Well, in the story, the I guess the fairy tale of the Pied Piper.
Mm-hmm.
We learn all these. It's interesting. The Grimm brothers, or I think the brothers Grimm, or whoever they were, were it's the Grimm brothers, I would say, would be the movie industry of today.
Yes.
Meaning they were working in concert with the powers that were,
setting the narrative.
It's set to establish the narratives of various things that had their basis in fact and reality, but they would give it to the people in a sense that it was a movie, just like they've done or it was not in this case, it was a book. Yes. With an account, everything from the Pied Piper to Jack and the Beanstalk and everything in between.
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, all of those things.
Wizard of Oz.
Right. So a lot of things, and the Grimm brothers weren't the only ones, but they would have been, say, they're symbolic of the times that was creating certain narratives in order to establish a certain mindset amongst the people.
That we actually been living out consciously and unconsciously, how you say, trying to harmonize socially to be a part of a social structure that we assumed was real, or that was in our best interest.
Right.
And this is back to, as I was talking to a politician who I was talking to earlier today, the idea that we keep forgetting that the parentis platform upon which de facto government has been operating on us has much to do with our naive concepts of how we approach politics, and also why many issues that we seek to resolve are not resolved because the people don't generally know that there's a parentis operation between operative government and the people that the people weren't aware of, but politicians are aware of, which is why what they say and what they promise never matches what they do. And the people would get frustrated because the storyline or the narrative, and the narrative has always been, progressive, and yet the conditions of the people have been degressive or degenerate.
Right. So those things, just to give a type of a background foundation for what we're talking about in that particular story, the Pied Piper, you had, a town in need of the services.
Yes, the services. Yes.
the services, if you will, of someone who had put themselves out to, had the expert problem solver.
Yes.
What's that sound like?
We got the cure, government. We came to help you.
There you go. And so in order to, but what was supposed to happen as a result of these services rendered, the piper was to been compensated, and in the case of the story, they were nigged on the actual terms of the agreement, the contract. And so the piper said, "Oh, I came to run out the rats, but I'm about to take your children."
Yes.
What does that sound like, y'all?
Wardship tenures that our people don't know. And when you start looking at these stories, they're actually allegories into reality.
That's what I'm saying.
Although the story itself is taken literally, is also not reality. It's like that fine line between real and prima facie, or semblance, simulacrum, distinguished from that which is real. And the incapacity for many people to cross that line, to discern the difference, to separate the wheat from the chaff intelligently, and with what you call positive and rightful action. And the rightful action is the rightful actions has been missing among us as a people for so many generations that wrongful concept has become our culture, and not only our cultivation, but our culture. And of course, which we already know, and we don't need to be redundant about it. This is why the Carlos Linnaeus and Blumenbach phenotype mind control operations adopted by the corporate states is so effective today, that creates no platform for cure. And that platform is the phenotype argument of race and racism, etc., which our people don't know is a political paradigm, not a true genetic or ancient principle of paradigm.
And it doesn't even exist. From what I can see, I'm going to use an example. It's probably something that a lot of folks look at. For instance, I watch America's Got Talent and Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah. And
one of the things, particularly even in America's, but more so in the Britain's Got Talent one, when they show the audience, it is just a mixture, a blending of different
people from different nation states.
When they're cheering or rooting for somebody,
it
doesn't matter whether those people are brown or beige or
it's not
cream
even
or whatever.
Presented as an argument.
They don't even seem to have the same.
The mentality, the reflection is totally different.
Yeah, you just see them like having they're just a homogenous blend of folks
Yes.
that are, enjoying the same thing.
And it
life.
doesn't mean that they don't have issues, but
Right.
you don't see it so blatant
Absolutely.
as you see it in America.
Right.
And it's not, and even when you start looking at the social dynamics, just like when you start looking at earlier, where how the women and entertainers here who are either Aboriginal, indigenous, were always traditionally mistreated or not recognized. You notice how when they went to Europe and other places that they were given awards and acknowledgments that they didn't get here. Didn't mean that they didn't have problems. It's like, but that's the distinction you'll recognize with Europeans in relationship to the Aboriginal people here, distinguished from the occupying Europeans and the Aboriginals that live here. You notice that distinct difference. And the point that you made is only indicative of that because it's so obvious, although a lot of people would actually overlook it. But then what it is indicative of is actually the cultural politics here that people generally just assume is everywhere.
Right.
And
right.
it really isn't everywhere.
It's not at all.
And
so it just becomes, there are, for case in point, there are, as you say, conflicts that arise due to the colors of, complexion of someone's skin.
Because remember, even as soon as we go there with the color game,
mm-hmm.
not knowing that is a caste paradigm, which is why you don't see people always running to that when you deal with people around the world.
Right.
They'll deal with nation state as an example. And commonly, the first thing people say here is, what color is your aunt? Is she light skin orange or black skin purple? Or is she a light skin black? How in rational mind does light skin black and then not black skin light come into play in the mentality of any thinking being, not recognizing it's an organized caste system?
Absolutely.
But when you're groomed under it and you start projecting it out into your social intercourse with others, they start leaning to it to try to satisfy their communications with you, but know that the civilized world doesn't really operate on that paradigm. And we pay the price of the Christian black codes, not even knowing that they're operative here in North America, which makes that unique. So we're not necessarily talking about whether someone likes you or not. We're talking about the reality of the political programming that many people aren't even aware exists. But we live it, or we operate under its rules because we've been trained in them. The issue is for us to begin to make discernment to recognize that those are political anomalies that are not in nature realities.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to start recognizing the difference so that we can start cleaning up the social structure, not just for us, but even the hybrid Europeans who domicile here on our land, right?
Mm-hmm.
As well as the people who don't even know what domicile is. Or like, as an example, if you ask most of our people, what is national domicilium, right? They wouldn't know. And then what is municipal domicilium? They wouldn't know, but yet that operates every day. And like, say, for instance, like when sometimes when we're traveling and you're going to the stores and you'll take me to different parts of Wilmington and we'll go right around a corner from absolute destitute, corrupt, dirty area 2 blocks away, and you have very pristine areas,
right,
where sweepers still come.
Right.
Right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Lawns are clean. Not a gum wrapper on the street. Very peaceful. You know what I mean? The quality of living is different. Same areas, blocks apart. But it indicates social grooming, political operations, political resource distribution, etc., i.e. social caste controls. Not intended to be personal, although it affects us personally, if you get the point. And so in the nature of our ongoing conversations, Dr. J,
mm-hmm.
Logically, we want things to be better for our people. But while being better for our people, we don't want the hybrid Europeans to necessarily suffer.
Right.
We don't want them to do worse because we want us to do better.
And that's, I think that's what some folk think, but that would not be operating from the heart space.
Exactly.
That would be not be operating in a manner that would not
would not be
create
productive
karma
for anyone.
or create karma.
Right.
Because if you're doing things that are negative and you're creating
your affairs.
Right.
In other words, you're writing the script for your life.
Mm-hmm.
This, and from a Berber and a Moabite cultural perspective, right? This is what it really means when Yeshua say, forgive your enemies. People don't understand it does not mean be docile to be abused, but it means don't project evil because evil comes your way, if you get the point.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you're still writing your script. And this is back to what you were having in your last class that I didn't get a chance to listen to at all, even when you're talking about near-death experiences, where people, how they say, leave their body and discover that we're all connected, whether you like it or not.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that we don't take responsibility for the being or placement, cycle placement where you are, because part of the cycle placement where you are still operates in the mind which lives, or the knowledge which lives, which can't die, the spirit that can't die. Because the spirit is what carries over, because the spirit don't require the body. Though the body may require the spirit. Interesting dynamics, but that's kind of like when you were analyzing.
The body does for animation. I mean,
requires the spirit.
Because other than that, it's just like a car without an engine.
Exactly.
Exactly. Like, you need, but you can have the one without the other, but not you can't have, you can have the body.
Yes.
Excuse me. You can have the spirit and the soul and not have the body. You don't need it.
Because even when you look at it rationally, right? Even when people are looking at it from an anthropomorphic perspective, if you analyze it without being emotional about it, itself is self-evident that the spirit lives without the body, but the body can't live without the spirit. Therefore, the body is the lesser.
Right.
If you get the whole point.
Right.
And of course, when we leave the body temporarily, for whatever the reason, is not even the point. That some of the memory stays there, because the memory stays there because it's clearly Akashic. I mean, it's still written in the energies of the what we call the cosmos. It's still there, which means it doesn't dissipate. Not unlike from a physical engineering perspective, people who do what you call physical engineering or analysis, right, to the level of physics that we recognize it, right? Mm-hmm. Energy doesn't change, it transforms.
Right.
And so once you look at that and you apply it to actually the politics of life, also for people who really understand the human existence or the human experience, why, and you analyze why are certain things done and what caused certain wise men and women of the past to do certain things, just like you'll hear some people critique, why did the Moors make a peace treaty with the Europeans who always been fighting against us and doing things and not being honorable? When you really analyze it, is because they know the karmic law. And they recognize that it's in the interest of us, not unlike the Prophet Noble Ali says, it's in your interest to be friendly to other men as it is for them to be friendly to you. And to understand the cosmic or the Coptic philosophies is not just a mere philosophy, it's a knowledge of how things work in nature. And so when you look at that, and then you look at the Moabite Canaanite culture, Gnostic culture, you'll understand what that really refers to is the rule or the law of cause and effect, and also reciprocity. Then now, you can see it working in nature.
I do want to, you mentioned Moabite Canaanite, and I've been listening, some of y'all probably are familiar with this young man. He's been around for a while, but I kind of see his video. You know how you see the little, the ad, the short come up on the video, so I was familiar. But then recently somebody sent me a video of his and I actually paid attention. I think I even sent it to you. And then I subscribed to his channel.
The one you sent me with Bedell?
Yes. So one of the things that's why I'm saying when you talked about Moabite, the Canaanite and Moabite. Now, Bedell talks about the Canaanite in the sense, and I wanted clarity on that, as if not so much that, because you always say that was us, But is that the us that we don't talk about that did the negative stuff? Because when he talks about the Canaanites are at one of those levels that deal with maybe the reptilian Moloch, the child sacrifices and stuff like that. Because when you
now isn't that also, with all due respect,
okay,
let's analyze when we read the history,
okay,
right?
All right.
When we know what's up, we're dealing with higher self, lower self, right?
True.
All right. So when you start reading, say, Quran, the Bible, Waspi, the Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, and the history books, what is an expression of the history of our both rise and fall, and an example of our living demonstrating what lower self living brings. And most of the time, it's the story of us what? Falling from grace.
Yes.
Or falling from that which is glorious, by virtue of misuse of glory and virtue of misuse of grace. When we're not talking from a spooky perspective, we're talking about from the reality of states of mind and states of living, principled states of living, that when they're violated, there's an operation in nature that will collapse this, etc. Then when you start looking at the human experience, you will see certain levels of civilization that last for thousands of years. Then you look at some that last 100 or a couple hundred years and they collapse, absolutely. Then when you study them, if you start looking beyond the emotional response, you start recognizing that the civilizations that have long life usually live harmonic with nature's laws and nature's God. And those that collapse usually violate established principle and law. And a lot of times we start looking at the circumstances of war or how people treat each other and just look at it from that perspective, not recognizing the rule of cause and effect or retribution, justice, things that are operating in nature's law that actually determine the capacity for certain constructed civilizations to be extensive or to be short-lived. And recognizing that a lot of this is not just our political opinions or what we believe in, but are actually acts of nature. Of what? Building, flowering, waning, destruction, and dissolution in cycles. And however, it also indicates our capacity by will to live by principle and expand or extend the life, or to violate them and shorten it.
Mm-hmm.
Cause and effect. I mean, and as you look right now, and as I was talking to a politician earlier today, I had a long conversation. As a matter of fact, when you called me earlier,
listen, you had a long conversation with a politician today, and guess what? I had about an hour and a half long conversation with a mayoral candidate politician today.
Yes, and I was talking about with a councilman. And unbeknownst to each other, but
right, we didn't know.
And the issue was that one of the things that came up is that he was moved to call me, so he called me, and I ran into him actually a week and a half ago in Philadelphia, and he saw me running down the street. He stopped his car, ran around the corner, said, "Please stop," and he wanted to talk to me. He recognized my face, and he knew he saw me from somewhere. He couldn't tell, but he knew that he had to talk to me, and so our conversation began there. However, after we had talked, I had sent him to certain congressional records, and also to some issues with the CFR, etc., some documented records relative to the House journals, also just for his reference point, because there's some things that he's doing this week currently that has to do with international affairs concerning reparations and stuff like that. If you're listening, you know who I'm. I won't mention your name, but you already know who our conversation is ongoing. And the interesting thing, as I brought some of these things up, his awareness of some of these things were grounded, and his lack of awareness of a lot of these other things were not grounded. And I was reminding him that one of the issues, or why our people are paying the price of some of the abuses, that they're not aware of the subject matter that they themselves are seeking to vote on when they don't even understand the political foundation.
True.
And as of today, just when you were calling me, he called me back, and we were going over. He was bringing up the philosophy page of the General Education Board, and saying, this is amazing. And one of the things that struck him, and he says, and he was kind of in some ways discouraged because all the work that he'd been doing in the community, and he was saying, all this work that we've been doing is for naught. I say, it's not for naught. It's not for naught. It's not for naught. Don't be discouraged. Recognize we have a heavy learning curve that has to take place with ourselves and with our people. And if you're breathing, it's not over. We don't have to keep paying the piper. We're paying the piper because we keep consenting to what we don't understand or don't comprehend or have limited knowledge of. Just because we've been putting a lot of our energy into these different platforms and meetings and everything, except that we've been misdirected, and don't be held back by looking at it and seeing these years that we've wasted, but yet understand that we didn't know.
Right.
And it's kind of rough when you start thinking, that you wasted these years and you got all these people coming to these meetings, and now that you're aware of the real politics, you're kind of feeling kind of bad because they're already started on a party line of conversation that now you already know is false. But when you started dealing with them, you didn't know it was false. You were sincerely doing what everybody does in the name of trying to help these people. Now that you're looking at the congressional record, you see that the politicians had a different agenda the whole time.
You're right. What I noticed, and I was talking to this candidate for about, I'm looking at my phone, an hour and 14 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And what made it so good is that I was able to interject some of the, where they're not necessarily knowledgeable about being a Moor, but yes, knowledgeable about a lot of the terminology, that we're not Black, but they go along to get along, so to speak. And in this conversation, because this is I'm talking to the divine feminine, I was able to talk about the times that we're in now are that across the nation. I said people are forming their own governments. Apart from, I said, there's nothing to say that we can't. And also that the divine feminine must reestablish the rightful place and reactivate. And I said, so yes, this is a good time. And I didn't think it was a good time for other reasons, but when I listened to the sister and what was her motivation, I had, when you get a conviction about something that you're supposed to do, then nobody should be able to move you from your course, because that's your course. They didn't, the Most High didn't speak to me, spoke to you, and you got to do what you have to do. But what I was given an opportunity to do was to give her information, that some of the information we are learning, we are sharing, to have that in her mind when you go into this, because we've been told we have to take government over again, and we need to bring it back to the republic form of
we
government.
Must be capable and competent
to be
while
able to
doing it.
Absolutely. Yes. And so this was the nature and the gist of it, and I'm supportive in that if on a local level we can start making changes at our local level.
First level.
We were talking about something, and I'm just gonna say we have a place in this area that's called it's for teens, right? And it's called the warehouse, right? Teen warehouse. Yes. Teen warehouse. And she brought to my attention, the candidate, that she felt that it was odd it was significant that the teen warehouse is 2 blocks away from the prison. And she talked about the pipeline. She said the fact that they call it a warehouse, and what are they doing, preparing them through the pipeline? And I was like, okay, she's got
the product,
right. She knows, that the possibility is that when sometimes these things are put in by
not accidental,
they have a hidden agenda.
They were already. It's almost like, as you often say when you start talking to different people and you start recognizing the different levels of information that they have, and they assume that they understood or comprehended an operation that they were a part in, and you, by virtue of information and fact research, recognize that they're not always aware of the platform that they themselves are participating in.
True.
And then watching the response when you get beyond opinion, but actually show them documented proof of the platforms that they're operating in, and would indicate to them without them saying it how people around them were having conversations with them, looking them straight in the eye, knowing that they were ignorant, and were going smiling in their faces, going along with it, and probably talking about them soon as they turned their back relative to their ignorance. And they thought they were being sincerely helpful for their people and their constituents.
Absolutely.
And then grappling with self-recognition of, damn, I wonder what they're thinking, because I know they had to know that I didn't know. Well, why didn't they tell me? And this is one of the responses that he had with me today too. I said, do you think that someone from Oddfellows or someone from Knights of Templar are going to turn around and tell you that they're descendants of colonists and that they're living off your virtues and that's the source of your suffering? Or are they going to play with you with the race paradigm that you were taught to accept as the narrative, and talk about what they're going to do in political office to change the attitudes of the people, when the agenda was in political action, not attitude? Attitude may reflect off it, but if you're thinking attitude, that keeps them kind of politically safe, because the reality is a political action. Not unlike when you start analyzing the reality of the politics, when, like, say, children are talked about, Christopher Columbus discovered America, distinguished from, but actually in harmony with, the political reality, which is known as the doctrine of discovery. That when you start looking into law cases and you start discovering how many of our people, indigenous people, keep losing cases relative to lands, rights, and inheritance taken by the corporate state from them and their families, it's the doctrine of discovery, not Christopher Columbus. But yet the Christopher Columbus is dominant in the minds of our people, and the doctrine of discovery, which is operative, is hidden under the argument of racism and prejudice, which is a mind control paradigm of phenotype set up by Carlos Linnaeus and Frederick Johann Blumenbach, but is politically active in society. But that paradigm is used to cover up the doctrine of discovery, which is the basis of the actual politics that our people are experiencing, and knowing that most of our people don't even know of its existence.
Do we have any recourse from, particularly in light of the fact that the Pope allegedly, or no, not the Pope, we talked about this a few weeks ago. What was the name of the
motu proprio?
No, there's that group, that ecclesiastical body, that governmental in between under the Pope that gave the I forgot what we did a show.
What, the bishopric?
No, you didn't even call it that. We did a show recently about it. But anyway, in light of that, using that denunciation, I'm going to call it, can that be used by Moors or anybody else who wanted to get some kind of relief from the suffering that has been, heaped upon them based on the fact that this admission?
I'll say this to that degree. Because now they're dealing with facts and realities, they will approach international law as opposed to an emotional march and pray attitude. They'll deal with law. In other words, it's like this. When you really don't understand what's wrong with your car and why it doesn't run, no matter how many times you stop the guy that coming from the corner store, and pay him to put lay his hands upon your car and let us pray, tires are not going to blow up and the engine is not going to start moving until someone comes past, whether you like them or not, they're understanding something about engines or electrical systems. And it may be something simple, and fix your car with knowledge, and then you can travel. It is not unlike when I was listening to a show earlier today, just happened to be you. and very often when you're making analysis of reality of your experience, of your own, but also that you've had with other people that know you when you came to your epiphany and your position turned 180 degrees. But at the same time, while that took place, the other reality that I recognized listening to some of your speeches and some of your sermons, really, because a lot of your sermons, are recorded that you probably forgot that's on distance stuff. Some of them I have that are useful today. But the angle that you would use now to actually uplift the people with the same information would appear to be a different person, only because the spirit and the angle from which you would express it more to the reality of people's experience and less from an allegorical or anthropological perspective that keeps people kind of asleep, if you get the whole point.
Right.
And once presented certain facts and realities that people can go see for themselves outside of you, then they start having that epiphany themselves. Then it's no longer just your perspective, it's theirs. But what they begin to recognize is that it wasn't just because uniquely you, that's available to anyone who starts dealing with reality. And one of the things that I recognize, even talking to the brother today, is that some people get kind of very uncomfortable when they discover that they've been asleep and they didn't know that they were asleep, but they were passionately dealing with a lot of people seriously in serious conversation and assuming that they were making headway, and they're preparing for something very important coming up, and they recognize that half of what they were dealing with was false.
And you just kind of threw a wrench into the whole thing.
It's like it's sort of like a hard knock life type thing.
Yeah, it's like,
and it ain't personal, because actually once you start showing people registered documents, they can't come back.
You didn't put that on him. He came to you.
Yes.
So something in him or something guiding him was
Yes.
leading him to a truth that he needed to have before he went to that next level with this. So it may make him back up a little bit, and he has to take stock and readjust his presentation. But it's better to go in prepared than half caught.
And that's kind of what our conversation was ending with when you called me in that area.
Okay.
And the real deal is when someone discovering that crazy glue ain't good enough to fix Humpty Dumpty, who fell off the wall. It's simple, yet it's complex, if you get the whole point, what it really represents. But yet it was just simply the fall that did all the damage. How do you reverse the fall? And one of the areas that we were talking about may be frustrating, but you have to have patience. If they're still breathing, it's still doable. Don't write them off because they were written off by people who they think is their representatives. Now that you discover that these people who claim to be their representatives were really their executioners on a political realm. And that is a political reality, not my opinion. Here, look at this. This is their document. Because I'm presenting it to you doesn't mean that that's my opinion.
Right.
I'm showing you part of their hidden agenda. It's only hidden because you weren't aware of it. So now you're arguing with these people thinking that you're going to get on their moral or ethical side by praying and marching, and that they feel guilty and give you some sandwiches that was promised to you by the other one, and now you discover that they've been playing good cop, bad cop with you.
And this is down through the ages. This is the same story that was happening
over and over again.
And I haven't read all of the Bhagavad Gita and
Yes.
all of those. I know of them and the various and the Vedas and all that stuff. But the thing that comes to mind, because I'm familiar with biblical narratives and
Yes.
tales and allegory and all that, is the conflict going between good God, bad God, at
the whole game.
Most people were like, well, God must be a little bit schizophrenic because he made us and then he wanted to kill us and he said and then he told them to kill them.
Then he's loving.
Then he's loving.
No, he's bloodthirsty.
But you're dealing with multiple beings that
who
are fighting to take control of you.
Who are competing
for your your allegiance and your fellowship, because what we don't know is, and many do know now, but they live off of what the energy that we give off,
We
the
project.
energy, the projection,
We
the
have value
fear.
to them, apparently, that we don't yet comprehend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
You know,
so we while we're sitting here thinking it's one thing, like, I mean, somebody said something in the comments about the Shriners. I think it was Gene Frazier or somebody, but I was listening to B Dell talking and showing the charts of, who was attached to what, and that they literally, I saw, like, they do things in plain sight. I believe in New York City, there
yes.
is a statue, I mean, like a bronze thing in the I think it's in New York, and it's coming out of the ground, and it looks like a reptile figure pulling a baby down into the underground, but the head of the baby is like a bag, a money bag.
Yes.
What does that say?
Pulpit.
Yeah, no, not only that,
pulling it into the pit.
It also, no, but not only that, it's a baby being pulled underground, and the head is shaped like a money bag. So it's telling us, yes, there's a thing going on.
They're telling you.
There's things going on, and it's financial that they gain from doing these things.
Telling you that the financial system that you're operating on, or that's operating on you, its headquarters is underground.
Yeah.
That is signal. But in the process, they're actually telling you certain truths, aren't they?
Absolutely, because that's what they're doing.
From the divine law perspective, that means even though they're codifying it, they're telling. So understanding natural law, that reduces the karmic response, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, someone who does not know natural law would probably respond like this. Dr. G, if that's the case, and they're doing this to our people, why would they tell our people? It would never dawn on them, is because they understand the law. That all things are governed by law. Now, in law, all law is specific. Now, what are we talking about? That's where the masses are asleep. They haven't been taught the truth of jurisprudence.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't been taught the truth of law, whether you're talking about hermetic law, civil law, judicial law, right? And all these things are operative at all times in organized societies. By our people have been held outside of those venues for so long and taught, i.e., what they like to refer to as straw man law, also tagged as 14th Amendment concepts. We have burnt our energy actually in a diversionary venue for so many generations that our people have a tendency to keep moving towards that paradigm to try to fix problems. It never fixes problems. They always get deeper, broader, and more concrete. And then we see progress right next door of people making and so conflictive and obvious. And because we don't have the reference of positive law, even if someone brought it up, we don't recognize that we've been living negative law. Doesn't mean that we're bad people. And it doesn't mean the people who are taking advantage of us are bad people necessarily. We're talking about organized structure that was founded on a false foundation and presented as real. And that's where we've been living. And we're now paying the price for that false paradigm. Problem of it is we won't let it go because we thought it and think that it's a political reality. And this is the area of both, say, the social damage that our people are suffering from, why it's difficult for people to organize our people to actually make, quote unquote, positive change, because we don't know the rules of the game, because we've been groomed in a false paradigm and we cling to it because that's all many of our people know. Even though it doesn't work to our interest, it's all we know.
Right.
And one of the interesting things is we're caught socially in the paradigm of trying to get people across that threshold while they're feeling threatened that, here you come and you opened up this gate and tell us to walk on the other side of this gate. No, come inside because we want to have this liberation discussion. And we're saying to them, you got to get out the fence. You got to think outside of the box. You got to have the courage. The gate is open. No, it isn't. It is. See all this fences blocking you? See that gate is open? Oh, we can't go out there because they're going to get us. you're already gotten. And
The Bible says in Jeremiah chapter 5, which is one of the things that woke me up from this religious paradigm, was that, as a quote, it says, they have men in cages like birds growing fat off them, but the people like it that way. But what will they do in the end? And I felt like when I had my awakening, my epiphany, I had opened the cage door and said, like that church song, "Little birdies, you're free." They looked at me like, we're not going out there, so no. we're gonna stay in the cage and find someplace else to hang ourselves.
Yeah,
up in
go in the other corner.
Right, we're not prepared for freedom.
We're getting out of this cage by going over in the other corner.
They didn't want to come out. They did not want to come out, and the book talks about this.
And that it implies, when you're talking about contract law, right? That implies what is called tacit acquiescence and consent.
Yeah.
Both of them mean the same thing politically. But you already know, by most of our people, not all, not knowing jurisprudence, they wouldn't even recognize those legal statements, not knowing that absolutely applies to our lifestyle in most of our communities. If you brought it up, they would think that you're trying to convert them to something, even though those are political truths and reality that applies to all humans based on their caste position. And it's sort of like people asking you about liberty, and then you give them the true definition, and they start telling you about they don't believe that because they were told something else, and yet they keep suffering the lack of liberty. Not unlike a conversation that we were having, and we ended when you actually had called me and told me you were coming around, right? And I was telling him, go in your law book and look up land. Most of our people would pick up a handful of soil and say that's the land and look what's beneath their feet. But yet, when you look at the definition, it deals with hereditaments, corporal and incorporeal, including liberties. And how many people even know that? People who basically have what they consider degreed educations and then get involved in the political realm in order to restore our people's liberties. And if you say land in the same sentence, they would not even know the relationship, only because they're not taught positive law jurisprudence. But we must accept the political reality. It wasn't intended to be taught to them because they're held as chattels. And then people get into their definition of slavery and everything, not even recognizing the connotation from the denotation that slave is a short for a nationality, the Slovakian people. But it's applied connotatively because of its application to political realities that took place mostly in the Western Hemisphere and connotatively applied in contemporary times. But it itself has no ancient origin. Yet the people think that slavery has an ancient origin. If you get the whole point.
I mean, you hear it from way even old movies. You'll see, well, even if you talk about the Hebrew slaves.
Yes.
How can you be Hebrew Slavics?
Exactly. Now, even and it's interesting, Dr. G, because that also indicates that by the fact that people's incapacity to know the denotation of certain linguistic forms, they assume the controlled narrative of displacement, even in socialization, and think certain things that are absolutely contemporary in their nature and origin were ancient. Not knowing that concepts or those types of misconceptions were consciously instituted. They weren't accidental. They were not circumstantial. Now, and so if you're dealing with people and you're really trying to fix something, and they're living their lives in a connotative state of mind relative to connotative linguistics, their response will come from that venue, that informational venue, not knowing that it's designed to support the forced servitude without someone having to stand physical guard. Therefore, we guard ourselves.
Right.
And in the nature of things, that's actually a fratricidal mentality. And upon examination, you can recognize why even this area acquired the name Kilmington. Now, when you start looking at social engineering, who would come to part of the conclusion of analysis that mind control paradigm is part responsible in reality for that fratricidal mentality that's not spoken of but is practiced in almost all areas where we are dominant.
Yeah.
And it never dawns on people that was engineered, really. And it's not to blame anyone. It's not to say, well, the Europeans did this, the European. No, we're talking about actual cause and effect, real politics of socialization. But if people don't have information on how things were constructed, it would never dawn on them the origin of that mentality. And they would, like, say, for instance, as he was talking earlier today, having, youth meetings to try to stop the violence among the youth and some of the practices that they are into. And I didn't get the chance to talk complete our conversation, but it was moving in that area when they're not even aware that this was engineered. It's not quote unquote black community culture. It's in social engineering that created this dead culture that we accept as being our own, not knowing. And it's not shifting blame. We're talking about real social engineering that it's hard for us to sometimes accept that we've been played. It's hard for us to sometimes accept that we're not the deep spiritual beings that we like to claim ourselves to be, that we've actually been living generations in a false paradigm that was well thought out. It wasn't incidental. And ego gets involved because it's kind of, because we like to think of ourselves as being special, or like most of our people like to say, we're saved type mentality. We operate on that mentality even if we're not making them statements. And then when we start analyzing the real politics, not opinion, that can be researched, we start seeing that this stuff was public, in our faces, seeable, but not seen. Then we have to analyze, where were we in this whole thing, mentally, really, when we assume that, quote unquote, we had degrees, assume we were educated, assume that we had special relationship with Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad, and then looking and seeing the conditions of our people that express the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And then trying to come to terms, what do we do about this? How do we really have a rational conversation with our fellow man to start solving this when we're living a false paradigm and they don't know it, and we're trying to talk to them on a higher degree that they're not exposed to, that they most of the time think is a belief.
Yeah.
Interesting. This burial, isn't it? Right beneath the surface.
It sure is.
And we've been paying the piper. And I was also talking about when, as an example, when me and Brother Raj, years ago, went to court in Atlantic County when I was doing work on that community center, and they fined him, and they were Buena Vista Township representatives were telling him he had to tear the building down and come get a permit. And then we beat them in court, and the magistrate called it a nullity. And he said, Mr. Bey, if you all come here early, we could have resolved this issue. And then he told, well, I forget the prosecutor's name, start with a B. You take care of this matter. And he was saying, well, these Moors think they're not supposed to pay taxes, blah, blah, blah. And he was going on, showing off before all the people, because it's one of the biggest courts I've ever been in, really. Bigger than like a theater, 3 sides, literally. And he said, did you have these documents in your possession? And he said, yes, but these Moors think that, and he's pulling his pants all up and stuff like this. He was showcasing. He said, the magistrate put his hand up like that. Did you have these documents? He said, yes. This is a nullity. It's as if it never took place. Restore this man. You all can go out in the hall and talk, do what you got to do. and everything was reversed. That's when I finished that community center. And as you were aware before, I had made an allodial permit. I think you saw that document. That's when I made that, and I finished building that building. They were mad as hell, but the principle is I did it not on attitude, but on law, because I understood the reality of the status.
Had you, when you said these documents, had you all submitted
He was
something
saying that
prior?
Yeah, because we made claims. We made claims, counterclaims.
Okay.
We made counterclaims, right? And we stated the law, right? Now, of course, we know, as an example, like I was telling the politician today, are you aware of the Clearfield Doctrine? To him. Now, we ain't going through that right now, but the principle is the foundation of our counterclaim, including request for quo warranto, even from the magistrate and from the bar, the British Accredited Registry, because we had right to, because we know that's what's operating. And then logically, that locked everything down. You know they're not going to go through that and educate these people. Right. So what they did, they dismissed the case as a nullity. So they had to give him his $3,600 back, and hoping that he didn't sue them, but he was learning too on his curve. But, it was pretty much stuff I initiated for him, if you get the whole point. But the deal of it is, that's the execution of the law. What is the execution of that law? Is that obligation already exists with them. We didn't ask them for anything. But we knew the difference between de facto and de jure, which is not expected with most of our people, because our people are talking de facto because they're trained de facto. And when someone starts talking de jure, they're totally unfamiliar, not the politicians. But this is not a conversation that comes to them. Our people immediately talking about, well, let me ask my mom or ask my aunt to get a loan on her house to get me out of this trouble so I can pay my taxes to you, to your corporation. You understand? Because I violated your permit. You see i.e. the county or the state versus you.
The city or
now, the corporate state is a corporation, you're the living, who are listed as a corporation. But once you know the difference, is back to that refinement of paying the piper, because we didn't pay attention. But he paid attention. And so the piper had to go for a walk. Now, a lot of our conversation is we know that until the people themselves stop acquiescing to color of law, that our general economic problems cannot be cured, because it has to come from us. And when you look at it from a metaphysical or philosophical position, when it's converted into what you call civil law, it means every man, woman, and child must confess their own. That's what that actually means. When it comes out of the allegory into what you call civil law, it means the same thing. Because now you're dealing with heritability issues. Of course, our people don't know that that's what that's really talking about, because they're not taught the origin. And this is back to when, once you start looking at the origins or the cultural origins, you find that these are stories that express the experience of man in their contracting with each other, in their honor or lack of honor with each other. Almost all those stories in the Bible refer to that and deal with estates. All of these things that our people haven't been studying. But if you notice, like, say, for instance, you as a past pastor, if you brought most of these things up, our people would stay in a static state of rolling across the floor, jumping up and down, but they would not make any political action of restoration. They would think that they prayed harder, jump up and down, roll across the floor. They thought that was glorifying God, if you get the point, rather than restoring their lost estate.
Right.
Not unlike, say, in the book of Isaiah 64:65, when it says, you have robbed me of a whole nation of people. Didn't say a whole color of people. Said a whole nation of people. Didn't say people of color. Said a whole nation of people. And you put your name on them as a curse. But I will slay thee and call them by another name. Another part says, I hold my hand out all the day long to a hard-hearted and rebellious people who were not called by my name. When they repent from their sinful ways, I will hear from heaven and heal their land. Now, most people would take that from, what denomination do you belong to?
Well, it also says forgive their sins.
Yeah, forgive their sins. Now, so when you look at it, Now, when most people look at the book, they keep thinking heaven somewhere, but that says land. So now that means not leaving the earth, doesn't it?
Right.
But it's also talking about hereditaments, subject matter that our people are never even discussed or talked about. Then when you look in the law book, the extension of what land actually is, not unlike our unfinished conversation earlier today, is far more than people think. It deals with liberties, accoutrements, the aggregate land, hereditaments, corporal and incorporeal, and all inheritances. So in the real political realm, doesn't that involve what's been happening with our people? Wardship tenures, right? Arbitrary, right? Color of office, color of law, color of authority, and all of those are arguments that are listed in activities that our people have been calling incorrectly racism and prejudice. What if you bring up the actual component operative parts that are actually in operation? Most of the people are totally unfamiliar. Totally unfamiliar. And we've been paying the piper wrongfully and out of order. And it's not unlike what I said to you when the magistrate declared the Buena Vista Township representatives that their claim was a nullity. Imagine all the finance, including the fact that we had to tear that building all the way down.
I mean, what would have been the real point in it to make you start all over if they wanted to?
We couldn't move unless we went to them, submitted blueprints, paid extensive finance.
Right.
That would have been far more than I was actually even charging him to even build the building, which would made it impossible, which would guarantee what the point of it is. Certain regulations are designed to keep certain people from doing certain things that would generate both liberties and finance for them, but appear to be lawful, not knowing that they were actually created to stagnate economic progress amongst targeted people. Even though right up the street, these people at the restaurant right up the street on the same side of the street, about a mile up before we get to Route 40, had put an addition, large addition, and people coming from all around, and they live in good.
Did they get a permit?
I don't know what they did or not, but I'm just saying how people who are part of, as they say, the system that possess a certain legal status in society and have certain names that they call themselves religiously, have liberty or economic liberties to do things that accelerate their economic and social standing. And whenever we do anything, we're constricted. And it's not accidental. It's to make us non-competitive. But it's done under a color of law. And our people kept assuming that it was the law and that these people were law officers. The distinction was that I knew better. And the other issue, I didn't sit around arguing about what they felt about us. I executed treaty and constitution effectively. And so we didn't have to pay the piper. My issue is that's small scale. But the real argument is that many of our people don't know that that applies to them. And therefore, they don't exercise their rights. And when not exercised by law, is called abandonment. And then when you look at, just like if you can look at in this area, when we start looking at some of these buildings, right? Most people don't even know that even when they so-called lost their properties under tax liens and stuff like that, that when they start looking at the political record, now you worked in housing, and I'm just reminding you to look at things a little differently. If you start looking at the actual records, you'll see the main one word that come up won't be lack of payment. It won't be the lien. It will be this word, abandonment. And how many people even pay attention to that? that if they understood what is on the record, distinguished from what they assumed it is, they're two different areas. Why would they have the major word on all lost properties as abandonment? Because you're dealing with an estate. What happens? Most people don't even know that's even involved in the equation. They'll start talking about how many payments they lost, and the city took their property. Remember, the city is a private corporation, foreign, not a living people. It's a corporate entity communicating with the living from the point of dead. Now that's the reality. But you already know, if you know politics and you know issue of birthright in a state, you're aware of that. But you know that most of our people can't think like that because they don't know what I just now said.
Right.
But yet what I just now said is the political fact, the actual political fact. So what do we keep doing? We keep trying to speak to the dead. Then the dead takes personage and by some hidden representative in some empty seat speaks to us through the dead and then takes our estate. And we say the city said this and the state said this, even though an intelligent being knows that those can't speak, can't breathe, can't think, can't be injured. It is no different than Santa Claus suing you because you didn't accept the cheaper bike. And so they come and take your car. And they've been doing to our people all the day long in the name of de facto government that we didn't even know is de facto. And we've been paying the piper because we haven't paid attention.
That's right.
Does it mean that information hasn't been out there? No, it has. What has happened? The people thought that facts coming from others were mere beliefs, and that our beliefs coming from the mind control general education board were the facts. And we've been doing imperfectly, or we've been doing perfectly what our parents through miseducation have been doing imperfectly, trained in it and given degrees and paying for it. Then look at this too, Dr. G. When you look at the so-called, what they refer to as the national deficit that's suffering right now, right, with all these businesses and corporate funds and retirement funds being expunged and made extinct by the politicians. You know what 40% of the so-called national debt is, Dr. G? 40%.
No, what is it?
Is called student loan debt. 40% of the deficit operated under the United States Corporation Company that's on call from around the world through U.S. Treasury bonds and U.S. bond systems, etc., which they refer to now as de-dollarization, because people need to know what it's really connected to, is 40%. So now, where are these people that represent 40% of the entire national debt that are in debt for an education that's non-functional? That's just a thought. That's just something for you all to ponder, for us to consider. Are they not paying the piper? They are.
Yeah, that's that's kind of hard.
And based on the fiat.
I want to go over to
Go ahead.
I starred some questions, comments that had questions attached to them, and I wanted to hear just a couple of them, just to. Of course, there's a couple based on what you said. This question here is: should we be dumping the dollar?
No, not. I wouldn't say dump or not dump. I say the dollar has dumped you, and that's what you. This is what we need to start doing, Dr. G. We need to start looking at things and recognize how things have been flipped while being presented to us to control a narrative or to support an oncoming narrative that we're not suspecting, meaning that we need to be suspect of everything they tell you and start looking at what's behind the curtain. Not unlike the Wizard of Oz, don't start waiting for the dog to move the curtain. You should be ripping that curtain down. You should be, not the dog. And start looking at things more realistic. Because the reality of it is, keep in mind that all this alleged national debt is the debt of a foreign bankrupt corporation run from Davos, Switzerland, that you've been deceived was your country. That's a political reality that you need to consider before you start trying to pay the piper. Then you should start thinking about what that reality actually is and what your place in it is. Because remember, fraud has no statute of limitation. That's number one. Number two, the people at large have been misclassified. That's fact, not fiction. That the estates, no matter how written, whether capital letters, small case, etc., by law, are restored back to the original people of the land by law, and they have not been notified. And they're still trying to satisfy a debt that never belonged to them. They've been continuously paying the piper. In the process, while they're attempting to fix things, logically, many families and people will be destroyed in the process. How do you say, when the dust settled? The real deal is that the perpetrators of the fraud are willing to sacrifice a lot of people rather than go on down by themselves. They're going to pull a third of these people down with them. That's what their intentions are. Our intentions is to reduce that carnage, which is why we're having this conversation, which is why how we talk anyway, Dr. D.
Here's another question. Who are the largest holders of U.S. Treasury bonds?
China and Japan.
China and
Also Saudi Arabia. China, Japan, Saudi Arabia. It may be in that sequence, but not exactly in that sequence, but those are your biggest holders. So now when you look at BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia,
that was a question.
India. Well, there you go. Now you understand what's taking place around the world. You know, as Chief Magistrate Jai was saying the other day, right? When we talked the last time, you know, people need to start paying attention to what other nation states are doing, because you'll get closer to the real politics that's taking place here. And our people think it's not related to us. It's just that we're slow. We're slow in our activities or in our thought process to bring resolution to our social, political, and economic problems here by dealing with emotional arguments. And I present to you respectfully that the illusions that we've been operating on have been detrimental and injurious to ourselves. And we need to start dealing with reality. And we're just sharing some of these realities with you in casual conversation, hoping that you do a little bit more research, come together and start resolving some of these issues. Because keep in mind, many of those who you're expecting to fix these things are themselves on the run. Even though physically they're not going somewhere, they're actually hiding, if you get the point. Not unlike certain politicians campaigning from the cellar or from the basement. Because they know what's coming. And what I'm saying also is that our people need to get more aware and more qualified, because we're going to be forced to start fixing our own stuff anyway. So I'm suggesting that we stop wasting our time on false venues and start directing that energy on social, political, spiritual, and economic realities.
You know, and the fact 2 weeks ago, you know, we had brother Taj Bey. He's the chief judge. Let me give his right title. It's what is it? His title.
Yeah, Chief Magistrate.
Chief Magistrate. And yourself and the two of us talking about coalition building. If you didn't see that video, I would suggest that you go back and look at that, because it spoke, or we spoke about, and he spoke about some specific things. I don't think he went over everything he went over at the conference.
Yeah, so it's technically it's actually like Chief Justice.
Yeah.
Actually, Now the deal of it is, like I was talking to the brother today, our people often get together and start talking about self-determination and stuff like that, not understanding that what they're saying is self-government.
Right.
In reality, what they're saying politically is taking your sovereignty back. And I know that most of them make those statements because everybody says it. But you know how like people start by social code start making statements when they really don't know what they just said. The problem that we really have right now is that in reality, the responsibility to those matters are being thrown in our laps. Now, with all of the different sort of corporate entities running because they can't bond, they can't rebond. So if they can't rebond, that means they can't reshelf. They can't restock. It's only a matter of time that it gets to a point that these people really start recognizing that they're not going to be able to go to the corner store and get certain foodstuffs, less more certain other products for real, not for maybe, not by opinion, for real. And that they're going to start going to certain banks and the doors are going to be closed. They're going to start going to ATMs and they're not going to work. And not unlike the allegorical story about musical chairs, it's happening in real time politically around the world. And this is what people need to recognize. We have these conversations here at the House of Reawakening Minds to put our people on guard, to encourage them to become more real about their lives. Because we can't stop the suffering, but we can reduce it with knowledge. But people can't be emotional about it. They have to be active. And you can't act on what you don't know, which is why we share information with the people, which you already know why. And you already know we're limited. However, people take responsibility for your lives. Why? Because people who've been sucking off of you, their wealth has been based on you not being interested in these subject matters that we've been discussing. And we've all been paying the piper. My interest is, and I know that Dr. G's interest is, for us to not continue to pay the piper, particularly when the piper is a fraud. That the contract was based in a fraud and a misrepresentation, and that we're losing generations because of it. If you comprehend, that's not based on opinion, that's based on reality. And the issue or the story of the Pied Piper, Dr. G, in real political terms, is that not honestly and provably represented by Rex 84, documented military documents? Yes, it is. Is it really affirmed by Executive Order 11490? Absolutely, yes, it is. Is it been operative? Yeah, absolutely, yes, it is. Has it been known by the general public? No. Why? Because both their leadership and the politicians know it and have not been dispensing that information. Has it been expressed as a so-called attempt to semi-inform the people? Yes, it was. What was it done with? Motu proprio from Pope Francis 2013. Also civil orders 2014, 2015 to Barack H. Obama. Also Barack H. Obama's speech at Hikupta at the convention in Egypt. All of these things were representative of that. These are political realities. But you know, and I know, Dr. G, from a real public information perspective, those things have not been common conversation with our people. And we're continuously paying the piper for it. The real unfortunate thing is, while we're continuing to throw our eggs in a dead basket, as you might say, the world is actively de-dollarizing. That's what it means. So when our people talk about de-dollarizing or dumping the dollar, they're looking at it from a physical perspective of that physical Federal Reserve note, when it involves international trade and acceptance in what you call full faith and credit, which is the operative platform upon which world trade economies are built. And so the distinction between money, credit, and trade matters of contract must be clearly retaught to our people, because since we have been the most misguided and the most miseducated, we've been paying the piper the most. And we also have not been, as a grander body, paying attention to those fundamental facts. Not that information wasn't there, and we've been paying the piper. Your response to that, Dr. J?
Now, I'm just going to get to some more questions. There's a couple of that have asked about the. Okay, here's one. How can the people in Africa be helpful in this process?
Same thing. They're doing it already. This is why you see many of the nation states on the continent, because you have roughly 54 nation states. And this is also why you see the Franciscan Brotherhood interfering with Niger at this particular time and helping in that coup that currently just recently took place, because they're still trying to control their colonial operations that never ended, but was guised under international aid, etc. And you see them starting to reject their political operations and interference. That's called on the surface de-dollarization. So people are looking at that Federal Reserve note. De-dollarization really deals with the hegemony jurisdiction operations of occupation. See, people who know politicians know that's what it actually is. People who don't understand politics are looking at the physicality of the Federal Reserve note, which is only surface.
Okay. Another one. Okay.
And also, you see where the Manchurian families are building those roads in African countries, and also building the roads in Jamaica that goes across the land, that shortcuts and brings all trade together, also in Brazil, etc. That's called de-dollarization. See, so publicly they'll say here de-dollarization, and so that controls the narrative. When people really understand the politics, it's decolonization. That's what it really is.
Here's a question
That people thought was over.
So why would debt be a reason to depopulate?
Because they're trying to kill the creditor, because they don't want the creditor to come after them. To put it bluntly.
Okay.
Because remember, the people here keep thinking that their economic and social problems are social attitudes under racism and prejudice, when it's really doctrine discovery operations of genocide and annexation. That's not really the conversation, but is actually the actual politics. And I also say, in relationship to that question, pay attention to what's going on in Maui after it burned.
That was going to be my next question.
And watch some of the people who were not listened to, or who were semi-silent, or who were silenced by the political realm, start speaking on European colonization having much to do with the mismanagement of the land that created this situation, including that it may not be totally accidental, that international, what you call land grabbers, are already
that was a question here.
Coming in on board to try to do what? Complete the annexation that took place in the 1800s. And the people think that that Hawaii is a United States state. No, they were occupied under annexation. Well, it wasn't the people's determination.
Yeah, this question, it said basically you addressed it. Could you speak on the Maui fires and the Aboriginals and the colonists land grabbing before and after the fire?
It was already planned. That's the best I can say, to be blunt and true.
Okay.
It's called encroachment in Executive Order 1149. They do it little at a time until the people are unable to defend themselves. Now, you notice that when they have people that come up, representatives, as they say, talking about that fire in Maui, and then they'll have this stage where they'll have different representatives from both fire, police, council people, mayors, etc. And you notice that the majority of them are hybrid Europeans. I thought that was Hawaii.
Yes.
And people don't understand what annexation means. Although it's obvious, the people, and notice that when the fires start, all of a sudden, the communications, including the alarms, nothing worked.
Nothing worked, yeah.
all of a sudden, but that's circumstantial, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yes.
As usual. But immediately, people came in to buy the land. Why would they buy a land that's all prone to fires? Why would they even think to invest in something that's totally isolated, has no outroots and everything? Do you think that wasn't planned?
And then when you looked at the aftermath, it looked a lot like paradise.
Of course.
So,
including, for any of you
Paradise,
all,
California.
any of you who know, that's an example.
A lot of dew fell. There was dew all over the place.
Yes. Not just that. When I was younger, one of my first jobs was at both an aluminum plant and also at another plant, Universal Rundle. You know where they have the porcelain tubs and stuff like that, those expensive porcelain tubs that was cast iron, and then they put different colors porcelain for people who could afford them. I had a job making them, not the cast, but actually putting the enamel and putting them into the ovens, right? Mm-hmm. And the real deal, what is one of the things I learned working at Universal Rundle? Different metals melt at certain temperatures. And let me say to you, an ordinary fire with wood does not melt metal. One of the things that I recognized when we were looking at some of the film the other night, Dr. G, when they were showing the fires in Maui, I noticed certain metals had pooled and rehardened just like water. And immediately came to my mind the what they would call the melting temperature of different metals. And I would suggest for you all to look at the different temperatures that are required to melt different metals in metallurgy, etc. And if you think that those fires were just circumstance of wood burning. And the other thing that was interesting when you look at some of the fires, you'll see buildings, you know that old building that they talked about in Maui, and you see it brick, it's just standing by itself because they did a lot of films around it. And right behind it is a bunch of trees, and the trees are still green. Mm-hmm. Yet the building is burnt out, and the trees are absolutely adjacent to the building. They literally wrap around the building, and they're still green. Yet the building is totally gutted down to the bricks. Now, someone who knows temperature, or what they call kindling temperature, and metals, etc., and wood, why would all the other wood burn out totally, and yet the trees that's leaning against the building are still green? Just something to think about. So we're talking basic common sense. So people can make conjecture one way or another. But let me say this to you. I'm not dumb, even if some people pretend that they are.
Somebody said that they said that it was due to downed electrical wire, which still is, you can get the acronym DO, and which is the other thing.
And look how fast it traveled within 17 minutes.
Yeah.
A whole town for miles engulfed. Oh, the hurricane did it. Oh, all right. And they right by water. It ain't like they need.
And they had somebody that wouldn't let them use the water. Remember that?
Yeah, isn't this interesting? Because this is what's been coming from the people themselves. The fire hydrants stopped working. Stopped working. The alarm systems stopped working. The internet stopped working. Their phones stopped working.
And somebody wanted them to get a permit to use more water.
Thank you.
They had to go
in a state of emergency like that.
Yeah.
Oh, it just happened at that moment. The point of it is, this is what I'm saying also, Dr. G, we keep paying the piper because when you really analyze what's going on the planet, is the real problem has been colonization. And the other problem is the dynamics of decolonization, And the cover-up is de-dollarization relative to the actions of nation states starting to take action to counter this corruption that has contaminated the whole world. The whole world has been deceived, and some people in it still don't want to recognize that they've been deceived. And all I'm saying is some continue to pay the piper, and I suggest those who are awakened to some degree stop paying the piper, because the piper can't live if you don't keep paying them. How you say they want to feed you BS don't mean you need to eat that sandwich.
See, my wife and I live in Hawaii, and every month on the 1st, without fail, the Civil Defense Service tests the alarm system for preparedness. People in Maui reported that, like you said, the fire hydrants had no water.
Exactly. And you think that's just coincidental at this time? I suggest you that the people that had them great lawns in them beautiful houses along the coast, their lawns look mighty green to me. And they certainly weren't using salt water.
Yeah.
And what I'm implying and we're saying, Dr. G, you know, some things are obvious, but they're so ugly, we don't always want to look at them. They rather pay the piper.
Here's a question. Yeah. This is Dr. G, why aren't the people that caused this not arrested?
Because
it is.
They don't understand. Can I respond to that, Dr. G? Go ahead. You first. I want you to respond to
my response is going to be, it's almost like when if a policy enforcer, aka police officer, commits a crime or does something, now you're going to tell the
why didn't the other policemen
you got to go to the other policemen to get them to arrest one of their own, because it didn't just happen by random people. This is organized,
coming from the very people you thought was
protecting,
and
looking after your well-being.
It's called the parentis principle, isn't it, Dr. G?
Mm-hmm.
People keep forgetting. Why do people keep misanalyzing a lot of politics, Dr. G? Upon examination, people keep forgetting that they've been colonized. They thought it was an attitude that went away. It's a political action established and activated. It's not an attitude.
Here, this is something. Yes, and explain how families stood with their backs against cement walls, yet they were not burned.
Thank you. Obvious. You know how they call, even when they're fighting fires, they call controlled burn?
Right.
You think that's not a controlled burn?
Yeah, it's just and whew, let me see.
And I'm just saying, look, observe. Don't get caught. Don't take it from an emotional or biased position. Pay attention and observe what's obvious. If you have a house that burns thoroughly, and the only thing that doesn't burn is bricks, and a vehicle that's next to that house, you start seeing the aluminum parts of it literally melt and flow like water, and the trees next to the building are still green, and you think some technology is not applied there, then I suggest that naivety is self-inflicted.
Here's a question. Ask Grand Sheik, if Moors are handling their affairs amongst the nations, will the economy in the West, I guess, be headed by Moors when BRICS claim their interests over here?
This is what's happening. The world has been waiting for us to act. We haven't acted except on a small scale. However, because the same issues that have affected us are affecting other state jurisdictions, they've become active to save themselves. Whether or not we're slow to act or react, that's on us. Meaning that the parade is on whether we join it or not. And it's called de-dollarization. People keep looking at the physical dollar, but it's a deeper political scale that's actually operative. And we need to start examining it, because not only do we not need to continue to pay the piper, we don't want to go down with the piper, because the Piper hasn't been our friend. The Piper has been in position to kill off generations. We just haven't figured that out yet because we thought the Piper was our legitimate constitutional government. Well, it wasn't and it isn't. Hard knock, hard truth still is the truth. Whether we want to deal with reality or not, we have a right to choose one way or another. The world is choosing to act. We can choose to be naive all we want to and go down with the Piper. I suggest that we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as their economics are concerned, if the world don't buy or stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds and dumping the ones that they do have, that means those voucher notes of the Circle Church and Chancery are going to come back here, and then you're going to have what they call accelerated inflation, which means even the products that they do have will be too costly. Now, if we want to start going to the store with a wheelbarrow full of those notes to get a loaf of bread, that's our choice to do. I say, seeing it coming, intelligent people should be getting together to supersede those activities before it gets that bad, because it's certainly moving in that direction.
I don't know whether you answered this in a way, but the question is whether what the relationship is between BRICS and the Moorish Divine and National Movement, if any.
BRICS, essentially on a larger political scale, is an activity that reflects what the Moorish Divine and National Movement was established for in the first place, for the restoration of lost estates. That's the relationship. Principles the same. Now you see it being activated by nation states around the world, although most of our people still choose to be civil rights passive and march and pray on it, while the world is moving on and institutions around us are collapsing right in our faces, and we're in this quandary of whether we want to become active or whether we want to try to preserve the passive position, which has been the culture in our communities, totally destructive, impoverishing, but that has been the culture. And the people are kind of fearful of change, but whether we choose to change or not matters not. The world is changing. And the things that we're trying to preserve are collapsing around our feet. Whether or not we want to be realistic about what's going on or not, that's still our choice. I say, don't pay the piper.
Okay. Should we be focused on establishing Moroccan states like AMPAC?
You can't. When I say that you can't, I'm not saying that you can't. We need not try to establish what already existed. We need to clean up and reactivate what already existed. Can it not be said, or can it be said that it is not, that it is provable for the record that Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1954, i.e. representative for the United States Corporation Company, relinquished jurisdiction at Morocco, and they closed down consular court venues and then promoted the civil rights operations? That's a fact, provable. Is it not provable that in 1952, that France, etc., and other nation states abandoned the United States Corporation Company that was supposed to be decolonizing? Do that research and answer your question, because the information is there. However, most of our people haven't been dealing with that kind of information because it hasn't been talked about openly. Why? We've been receiving and groomed under another narrative known as the civil rights movement, diverting us from the political reality. Problem has been, while we've been playing these march and pray games for decades with so-called leaders who were assigned to keep us busy marching and praying, the world's economies have been collapsing, and the world governments are starting to act, and we're still trying to live in the civil rights, can I get on the bus mentality. That's the reality. That's not a condemnation. That's an honest assessment.
Here's a comment. Indigenous people around the world need to stop the group resonance frequency and realize the only book we have is nature, aka astrology. And I agree with that. We have to, and I want to go back to what you were talking about, what's going on around the world. I know there's someone online, and I don't know if I shared this with you, that I had spent some time. I know I mentioned it on Tuesday night show that I had talked with a sister in South America, and I know they're online right now. And when I think in terms of what we're afraid over here, sometimes we know these things, but people are, as a group, are afraid to move forward.
We're in the belly of the beast,
right.
Meaning that the people know they're in the belly of the beast.
Right, and see, they're over there under occupation, under French colonization,
yes.
and going to the point where declaring who they are and fighting this fight to the point where they've been pulled out of their homes and just what they
yes.
were wearing, everything taken from
yes.
Disability
yes.
taken away,
yes.
bank accounts shut down,
yes.
family members beaten and or killed.
What are they reinforcing?
But I'm saying they're online right now. I know they're
yes.
on. I can see that they're online, but they're still fighting
exactly.
because they believe that that what you've been teaching. They heard a lot of this stuff from coming over the years from you, and they're risking life and limb for not only their own liberty but the liberty of their whole nation.
Now,
because they're in occupation.
Let's look at this. What are the hybrid Europeans proving? They're proving to you themselves that they're not your friend. They're proving to you themselves that their mission has been genocide. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to be told now, do you? So what does it also prove? It proves that anything that we've been doing to the contrary, trying to make peace with enemies that we didn't know were enemies, were all for naught, because their agenda was always in place. When you started activating rights that belonged to you, what did they do? They took off their mask and showed their faces. That's all. They're not doing anything new. They're just not programming. They're not hiding behind programs anymore, if you get the point. If you get the whole point. But is it not what we've been telling you all the time? No, they're showing you who they are. We don't have to tell you now, they're showing it.
Right.
So what does it indicate for us as a people? That the true Americans should start doing what? Uniting, recognizing that we are the Americans. They are not. They're the alien. And they've been telling you that you're the alien of America. You're the Americans who are under occupation. We're the Americans that are under occupation. And we started thinking that we're different people. That's our greater problem.
Oh, here's a question. Eric Booker is asking what is dumb diversity. So that's a papal bull, right?
That's one of the papal bulls that's been operative on us that we've been falsely calling racism and prejudice. And it's operative. Now you're talking to real politics. But how many of our people know that? They've been diverted from that kind of information so they could start talking attitude and what complexion of your skin was and whether somebody liked you or not, or trying to prove somebody that you were human. We are somebody. Say it in unison. Everybody say it. We are somebody. Meanwhile, the people that started that stuff got political, comfortable jobs, don't they? Yeah, being a part of the system that was killing their people. However, the nations of the world will start saying de-dollarization, aren't they? What does that really mean in its real essence? Decolonization. That's what it means. That's the real agenda of the day. In the restoration of a state, what does that mean? Nationalization. So what are those nation states doing in South America? They're nationalizing their resources and their people. What's happening in Sindh, that you call India? They're nationalizing their resources using domestic currencies. That's called nationalization. What are they doing in Manchuria, in China? They're nationalizing, using their own resources and resisting the outside European, what they call Western influence. It's just called de-dollarization in the mainstream news. That's not what's really going on. It's decolonization. I suggest these people here start getting realistic about what's really going on in the world because it's affecting everybody. And hiding from the reality because you want to be a part of a system that you've never been a part of. You've been a victim of. Accept that reality. Start using intelligence to start preparing to rebuild this collapsed society.
So, okay, but they have the guns. So wouldn't we have to wait for this thing to crash to really see our efforts come to fruition as a nation?
Because it ain't about
the
that.
Nations around the world have the majority
See,
of their people.
this is back to the issue that the people by intention and even by what the hybrid Europeans said themselves, they would encroach and encroach and encroach, and the people would be convinced that they would have no power whatsoever and that they would capitulate. And once they recognize the capitulation, they will execute what? Their devouring processes, which is what's going on. Are we powerless? No. Have we been convinced that we're powerless?
Yes. Yes.
That's a distinction.
I heard Aaron Lyons on Black Magic 363 the other day talking about, and I'm not sure what the question was, but the gist of it was when she was asked some question about, do you believe, for instance, say the Maui fires was something that was intentionally set, and that I'm just making this up, and that would bring on more whatever. And what she said was so profound. She said there are people going to be in one of two dimensions of
exactly,
and wherever you are in your reality.
That's
and
what
I mean,
you build on.
That's where you. She says some people won't know about these things simply because they are in, and not because they're in ignorance, because they not because dimensionally they are not, and so we get sucked into this third dimension.
That's
with everything,
why,
and that's why we feel all these, and that's why we've been saying, and I've even said it on, when I get a chance to not talk about specifically nationality and birthright, that we've got to raise our vibration. We've got to raise our vibrations to the place where these things, you are what they say, in it, but not of it.
Now,
you see it,
exactly,
but you are not affected by it because you have intentionally put yourself in a higher vibrational state.
Now, look at this, Dr. G. Aren't they both creating and executing a pre-planned paradigm?
Yes.
That we're living?
Yes.
That's not opinion, that's provable. It's not what we believe, it's documented.
Yes.
And our experience is a reflection of the effect of cause.
Right.
Which means this stuff didn't just happen. It really didn't. And even what's hidden has been uncovered.
That's right.
And
the
so,
occult.
Exactly.
The occult.
They're bluntly, meaning that it's like this. They're not even wasting energy or the finance to, i.e., have secret privy council to set up programming to keep the people asleep. They're just bluntly abusing the people.
Right.
It's just that people are in denial that, after all, aren't they government? Aren't they supposed to be fair? Aren't the court systems there for justice? How many generations do you need to suffer to prove that the so-called public prisons are POW camps? And that they're privately owned, and that including the politicians who have stock in them. Do you know how many cases just in Philadelphia area alone where it has been proven that magistrates have stock in youth penal facilities paid for by taxpayers, and that they've been grooming the children from school to prisons, and they have stock in it? And it's provable, and our people still sitting around talking about racism and prejudice rather than genocide. And they say, well, it's a matter of how you look at it. Your families are all broke up. How do you want to look at it? Your youth are dying younger and younger. How do you want to look at this? After 7, you don't even own your own children. How do you want to look at this? And it's all been by social engineering that's documented. How do you want to look at this? Does it have anything to do with what you believe? No, it has to do with what you're living, whether you like it or not. Now, we've been paying the piper. How many more generations are we going to use to keep paying the piper?
That's right.
It's there. And the issue is also, Dr. G, is that it's coming out in the open. And so a lot of things we've been saying for years are blatantly apparent. It's not because we said it, it's just because we were observing reality. That's all. And some people continue to blind themselves into this false matrix of democracy, which is actually a war program, counter to the republic that they overthrew. Mm-hmm. But has it not been that we've been telling for decades about Organic Act of Congress 1871, February 2nd? It's not that information ain't there. And what have we been doing? We've been paying tax to the enemy who's been governing over us, but is not our government. Enforcing them, funding them, and they've been waging war on us. 11490, Rex 84, King Alfred. Never a secret. Philosophy page, General Education Board, 1902. Obvious. And what have we been doing? Marching and praying. And what have they done? Successfully destroyed our families while we've been playing passive, be a part of this fraud game as the basis of so-called black politics. Even the Asiatics that are in Congress, what did they have to do to even have a good conversation? They had to establish a separate platform called Black Caucus. If that's not a demonstration that you're not part of this system, what else needs to be?
Next question. Good one.
To prove to you that they had no jurisdictional powers.
Grand Rising, Grand Sheik. Regarding nationality, is there a plan to unite Moors, and those of us who identify as indigenous Indian under one umbrella or optional categories within the Moorish nation?
Always been. The issue has been whether the people have come to the level of will and consciousness to make people around there conscious of the real politics, to recognize that we are the same people, just simply misrepresented to create the schism that you're identifying, that we agree that's there, but we recognize that it was militarily a schism operation. So the people need to know that in order for them to put down their so-called guards against themselves and put that guard up against colonialism. That's been the problem. But the operative program has been in place for over 100 years, never hidden. That the people haven't been paying attention because they kept thinking it was clubism or some religion, when it's actually a political action of civil or civics for restoration of a lost estate. Obvious and documented, not acknowledged, though, by some of the people to whom it was presented to. And so you had a body of people that were being passive, pretending to be active just because they went to church, mosque, and synagogue, thinking that they was doing God a favor. That's what our problem has been. And no one will tell us because we've been so sensitive. And as soon as you are not politically correct, they will attack you. So how can people who want to live an illusion live reality? It doesn't add up mathematically. And so nature doesn't sit around and deal with our titles, our persons, and our stations. She recognizes only merit. Now merit is being commanded of everybody, and everybody's now uncomfortable, aren't they? One aspect of it is called de-dollarization, because people see what's coming. Now they're threatened, aren't they?
Well, that's another thing why we were talking even about coalition building. That's even included in that.
And is that not what was established? Let's look at this, Dr. G, even that statement, right? When Noble Drawley was on the scene, and he had the Moorish Monitor and the Moorish Guide newspapers, you had people that wrote for them newspapers from all different societies, including some of the Europeans. And he even made the statement, some of the Europeans are helping me. Why are not you? The Negro problem is your problem. And what do our people continue to do? Play that race paradigm of schism operations and talk about, well, how come we didn't come together? Because our people didn't want to hear it. They thought they was going to get some kind of civil rights benefit. And we've been playing that game with ourselves and our children for decades. And now that it has totally failed us and the world is and the economics are collapsing, all of a sudden, We need to come together. Is there a program that was set up to bring unity? Sure, it was. Were we living by it? No, because we all thought that our different beliefs was the answer. Most of the beliefs had nothing to do with the political reality. And if someone brought up the political reality, we start talking about, oh, you're a renegade. Oh, you're against government. Oh, you're anti-American. And so the anti-Americans are the colonists. And they're the only ones weren't being charged. As a matter of fact, they were attacking all the Americans. They were acting like Americans, whether you deal with Mexico, Brazil, Belize, Argentina, Ecuador, etc. And they had some of their members of their societies in all of these political jurisdictions undermining their governments. So I guarantee you the problems that are going on in Ecuador right now, including them brothers that got assassinated, if you dig deeper, you're going to find a 3-letter agency from North America involved. That's the truth. Now, at what point are we, being the real Americans, going to start de-dollarization? And we ain't talking about that physical note.
Here's the question.
It's up to us to get real or not.
And Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, any words on Moorish American stance or reply to Canada's insistence of making a application in order to denounce citizenship?
See, this is the deal. The citizenship claim is itself a false. So if you're going to denounce a citizenship, can you show me the document that made you a citizen? In other words, if you're going to get divorced, show me the certificate that showed the marriage. Because citizenship is a political marriage. Another issue in relationship to that, for everyone listening tonight to analyze, Dr. G, when they set up the so-called Freedmen's Bureau that they raped and made sure it closed down within 3 years, which is why nobody got a how you say 40 acres and a mule, as an example, and the manumission issue, which we went over a few times here, proving that it had nothing to do with liberties. Though the illusion of liberty, it has been the narrative with our people for generations, that never existed. Can you show the history where the people of Asiatic African descent went through the Naturalization Act and had a card that showed them to be, quote unquote, U.S. citizens? Does such documentation exist? No, it does not. So do you need to be divorced from a colonial power that you were never married to? You were only occupied by? Just a question. And isn't it conveniently interesting that Canada jurisdiction and the United States Corporation Company jurisdiction has the same international venue under the Queen of England? Jurisdiction, including many of the islands here. But on the surface, demonstrated or presented as different jurisdictions. Isn't it a fact for any of you that do research that shows the 10% tax that you have been paying whenever you stayed in any hotel actually went to England, but not told to you that that's a fact, provable? How about that? Do a little bit of research and then come back with some more rational positions for all of us and share the information that you find out, because it ain't hidden, it's just not talked about. So that means the real Americans, the first people of the land, i.e. the Aboriginal, sometimes called First Nation, need to start acting like First Nation. And stop talking about it. As if we're separate clubs. You get the point?
Mm-hmm.
And on the political realm, all over the world, what is that called? Nationalization. And what our people keep on trying to live under? Naturalization, citizenship under foreign corporation that could never be a reality. See the Dred Scott case, 1857. See the William Dungy case, 1854, and see the distinction of the reality of the status of the people. It's not that it's not established in law, is that our people don't want to deal reality because they keep trying to be a part of something that they've never been a part of. That's only been in place to harm them.
Here's the point. Dr. G, Grand Sheik, our power comes from our numbers, right?
Exactly.
So if we don't have the majority of our people awake, so to speak, what do you suggest in the meantime?
Now this is back to what it is. The conversations that we've been having here at the House of Reawakening Minds are based on real political and historical facts. It's not that this information has not been available to others, is that they have not chose to rock the boat and speak honestly. So the question should go to them. Why have they not been honest about European colonial operations at North America under unum sanctum and the doctrine of discovery? It's not that that's not the political fact, is that they won't talk about it because it rocks their boat, and the corporate operatives won't give them so-called corporate contributions to keep their civil rights marching and praying organizations operative. The question should go to them.
But from a standpoint of we the people, we
the people got to stop funding things that don't fund you. How about that? And stop pretending that you don't know that we got sellouts who've been so-called leading our people, or should we say misleading our people, and have never been charged. It's called overseer operations that the people keep thinking ended in 1865 when it didn't. And some of them overseers will say statements like this: "Oh, looks like I brought my people into a burning house. My people are refugees in their own land. You figure that out." We don't have to name names. All we need to do is start looking at the records of history. Some of the statements you don't even have to read between the lines because they're literally telling you.
Well, local government structures have been recommended, and where we educate and have, if you're more, then we need to, I think we just need to pack out these governments with our own people, bring that knowledge so that they know what kind of government is one that's conducive to the people.
Dr. G. Now I'm going to show you redundancy. This is redundancy, some of which a lot of people have complained about.
Okay.
Didn't Noble Drew set up the Old Canaanite Temple, which was a civic organization?
Yes.
Didn't that civic organization evolve into what is known as the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which was registered as a civic organization in Chicago, Illinois, where on the research you could see that there was funds and a trust that was set up to protect our people, and that was undermined by people within and without, and it's documented and it is known, and we keep on trying to reinvent the wheel when the wheel was already in place. And good men and women for decades have been trying to get us to get onto the wheel and take our places among the affairs of man.
How do we do that?
That's what civics is about.
Yeah.
So if it's just like I was talking to that politician today, don't get frustrated for the people acting or ignorance. Change the way you've been communicating with them. It's not that you haven't been communicating with them. It's not that you haven't been having town meetings with them. It's that you've been arguing racism when you should have been teaching them civics. That's it. That's the venue. What they're asking for are civic cures. So you have a people who have not been taught civics that keep arguing civic issues.
And that is one of the reasons why I always, when people call and I know it's a civics related question,
there you go.
I will
direct them to someone who's teaching civics.
And this is what I'm putting right now. Brother Yakub, he did an excellent presentation during our session. He has free civics classes.
Now, what were all of these so-called leaders put in place for? To teach civics. What have they done? They have breached their responsibility.
Well, he does civics and law.
Yeah, so but law is civics. That's the point. You see, they're not separate. See, this is the problem. We keep separating subject matters that come under civics, which means incompetence.
Well, he teaches civics and laws
But
included.
because that is civics.
Well, he teaches law.
But it is civics.
Okay, all right.
You know,
Yeah, I get your point. Just, I mean, when you have questions, folks like to call me or call
I know they like to beat
and
you
I'm
up,
saying,
but
get in the class
now
and,
let's look
and
at
learn
this.
civics.
Let's look at this.
Yeah.
Let's look at this. When people talking about rights and liberties, that's civics.
Yeah.
When people talking about hereditaments, that's civics. When people talking about land, 40 acres and a mule, that's civics.
Yeah.
When people talking about the fiction of the 14th Amendment, that's civics. When they're talking about treaty enforcement, that's civics. When they're talking about the monetary system, that's civics. When they're talking about voting, that's civics. When they're talking about any level of government, local, municipal, state, government, national, international, that's civics. Why is civics not taught to these people who keep catching hell? Because it's not been in the interest of those who are occupying these people and living off their virtues to teach them the rules of the game, because they can't take advantage of them if they know the rules of the game. What are those classified people who don't know the rules of the game? They're referred to legally as persons of color. It's not an identity. It's a caste classification.
Okay, here's the question. Why don't you, Taj, teach treaty so the Moors can help themselves? Like,
what do you think?
Let me finish the question. Like Noble Drew Ali stated, wouldn't you agree that everything outside of international law is delaying the Moors' justice?
What do you think that we've been teaching for years, except that you haven't acknowledged it?
Are you being...
It's like people pouring water on the fire and they're saying, when are you going to start pouring water on the fire? When are you going to start helping get some water to pour on this fire? When are you going to start taking responsibility in matters that you recognize that are corrupt? And stop staying silent. And stop staying passive. And stop looking for others to do what you should be doing currently.
Okay. Well, listen, we are a little bit over time.
Oh, as usual.
As usual. And we are, of course, always happy to be here with you all. Want to remind you, though, that on next Friday,
for real,
next Friday, we, those of you who like to come out for our in-person civics classes, it is next Friday, the 25th of August, here at the House of Real. Let me put this under here. In-person civics classes are back in House of Real Awakening Minds every fourth Friday. Whoops. My stuff is, I guess it has expired.
It's beeping.
It's the time. I'm supposed to be off by 9:30, so now it's ringing. Okay, I do apologize for that. We're still on. Don't call, please, whatever you're doing. Every fourth Friday. It's probably more like 9 to 11. 7 to 11 than 7 to 9:30, because it's only around 11 o'clock when we get out of there. But it's 7 to 9:30. And I know some of you are RSVPing online. You don't have to RSVP in order to attend. We appreciate RSVPs, because then we start to get a feel for
space, so we don't be overloaded.
Yeah, we can expect the numbers, but there's no need to RSVP. The donation is 20 Federal Reserve notes at the door, and that's it. So we would love to see you next Friday at the House of Real Awakening Minds. And we will have flash drives available there. They're like 5 notes cheaper when you get them in person, because you don't have to ship them. So if you'd like to come, please, because there will be no fourth Friday.
Not this month.
Civic,
not
no,
this moon.
No, there will be this one. There will not be one in September.
In the next moon. Yeah.
Right, in the next moon. So if you miss this one that's coming up next Friday, then there won't be another one until October.
Yeah.
Until October. So we are grateful for you all being here with us today, and all of the awesome comments and questions. And we apologize for not being able. Time
does not allow.
Yeah, to address all of your questions. Again, those of you who like to have consultation with our Grand Sheik. Very difficult. This is the hardest working man in the nation, I believe. But when you do come personally here, I know you try to give as much time as
As
you
I
can
can.
to those who come in person. So if you want to, because the next time we have a big event, it's not going to be until April.
Yes.
Not going to be until
To
April.
April moon.
April 2024. So otherwise, you're going to have to just come on our 4 Fridays, and there will be none in October. I mean, no, none in September. I'm sorry. So come this coming Friday the 25th, we would love to have you, and we will continue to do our first and third Friday lives that we do.
And remember, because remember even when we're doing these conversations, we only have basically 2 hours,
right,
to really even deal with subject matter. So this is a sharing venue, an encouragement venue. You understand, and where we dispense information and encourage you all to take responsibility and do your part in the restoration of the lost estate of our people, and stop looking for sacrificial lambs to do the work that you should be a part of.
Oh, Sister Light Tajiri Bey says, Grand Sheik, you have been holding up the people for many, many, many years. We each and all are here to assist, and we thank you so much.
Thank you. Hope I did some good.
So you've been working hard on Moorish, and I appreciate all that you're doing. Just to let y'all know, the picture that you see, on our website is not. Let me see what's on here. Yeah, it's not actually the end. I was like, oh, I hope they don't think that's it, Grand Sheik. But it is indicative of what we're doing with the Moorish Inn. So let me bring this up the screen. Can y'all see that? Okay, I don't know. Please just see if I can bring that all. Ooh. Guess that's how you do it. That picture right there. We're still looking. You can join our 40/40 legacy group. The property doesn't look exactly like that, but the principle is it's looking pretty good, and Grand Sheik has been working his tail off to get this together. So we want to make sure you join our legacy group, so that you can, and also those of you, I think, let you know that we were not going to be, as of next month, I'm not going to be doing the banners, all those banners, but we want you to join our business marketplace.
Yes.
Go to our website. The website is just growing and expanding.
Yes.
And I'm just excited because Sister LaChris, is super when it comes to this, and she's got a lot of information here about what we're doing, and she's got us on here, and folks that are doing what they're doing are our chairman of the board and so forth. So we just thank you so much for supporting us. For supporting us. If you have not joined the website, we want you to join the website, because that's where we'll be giving you as much information.
And don't forget to share.
Right. Let other folks know that we are here.
And you know what? As I was talking to the councilman today, and he was saying, "Do all the politicians know this?" I said, 90% of them are Masons and Eastern Stars. You think they're going to come out with this kind of conversation against their own interest? I doubt it.
Yeah, and the ones that don't know, like him, are happy to get that information.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're happy to get that, because then it shakes the foundation
exactly
of what they've been standing on, and it's like, oh, no, this is like,
he was telling me about some of the meetings. He's gonna send me some.
Right.
And he said now he know why he was getting certain resistance in
situations
that made sense, absolute sense, and he couldn't understand why their responses, while they would talk things, and then when he'd bring it up to real act, they would attack him. And he couldn't put that together. I said, now you understand.
Yeah.
But the fact that you keep thinking is all of our training. We keep thinking they're presenting for us. They're not representing. They're representing the corporate world. They're a private corporation. The sooner you get this through your head, the sooner you will recognize they always say one thing to get your support and your taxes and do the exact opposite.
Your vote, whatever.
It's never been different how many generations you need to sacrifice before you figure out what they're, not what I'm saying, what they're showing you. They're showing you this, not me, because I'm talking about it, because I'm exposing the documents. They're showing you.
Yeah.
And then you mad at me because I'm talking about it.
Listen.
It's in, why don't you fix this? How about that man you paid them taxes to? That you voted for?
Thank you. Yes. Well, we love you too. We thank you all. We appreciate your comments and your, just the way you are. This is community. Like I said on Tuesday night.
It is.
This is community. Those, especially those of you who come over and over again. When each time you come back, you realize, you all know who each other are over here, and we're building something here.
Exactly.
And before ish hits the fan, and it's it kind of has hit the fan, but it's just
some of the things are really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's like this. We have to be honest and start admitting to what's broken before we can put our energies to fix it. Honesty sometimes is really uncomfortable. And like Nichols said, he says, people ask for the truth. They don't want to know the truth. You can't handle the truth. Then why don't people tell us the truth? Then when we tell you the truth, how come you're not fixing it? How come you're not helping to fix it? How about that? Anyway, have a good night. We love you all.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We absolutely do. And hope to see you all next Friday at the House of Reawakening Minds. Till next time.
The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine.